So what I'd like to do for the few moments which are mine to share is just to provide just some basic tips and tools on some spiritual ways and approaches to dealing with stress in general, but more specifically with holiday stress. We all know that life in and of itself can be very stressful, depending upon, of course, our ages and stages in life, our vocation, the level of responsibility, the dynamic and nuances of our relationships and relationship responsibilities, whether we are parents or grandparents or work in high-level, stressful jobs and careers and vocations. But just living in this world can produce its own measure of stress in many ways. The American Psychological Association said in a survey that 38% of people surveyed said that they experienced increased stress during the holidays. And I just noted here, please excuse me, a few areas that are oftentimes causes of stress during the holiday period, particularly. Some of those causes of stress are financial. Oftentimes during the holidays, people are traveling. We're dealing now with, of course, inflation, and everything has gone up. Air travel is very expensive. Gas is very expensive. And so just planning and moving about, especially for those who will engage in travel, can incur a deal of financial stress. And then there's gifts. And I'm going to talk about how we address each of these areas in just a moment. Many individuals and families have a tradition of gift exchanging, and some people feel the burden of purchasing gifts for a large number of people. And in addition to family members and friends, oftentimes on jobs, there's secret Santas and Pollyanna gifts. And we feel this pressure and stress to participate in these job events, and then just events in general. Again, office parties and family get-togethers, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment, and the various events that are often held from Thanksgiving to New Year's. And these events, attending them, planning for them, participating in them, feeling obligated to show up at them can produce a certain amount of stress. Then there are individuals who experience loneliness that's magnified during the holidays. Individuals who don't have families or large families, who aren't connected to groups of friends who get together on a regular basis and fellowship together. And that loneliness can become very, very pronounced during the holidays. Fatigue. Typically during the holiday season, we're winding down the year. This is the 11th month of the year. There is that accumulated fatigue that we've already experienced, just kind of pushing through the fall, and with all that's going on socially and politically on the national and international stage, in addition to our personal family responsibilities, sometimes that just being worn out produces a measure of stress. Grief is a biggie during the holiday season. For some individuals, they're experiencing their first Thanksgiving or first Christmas or first New Year celebration without a particular loved one, a parent, a grandparent, that empty chair around the table. And for those who have strong family traditions and who are accustomed to those family gatherings during the holidays, that empty chair around the table can really cause that grief to, I'll use the term, flare up in a very powerful and challenging way. Lack of planning. The holiday season comes upon us and we haven't really planned how we're going to do all these things I just finished talking about. And now this lack of planning creates stress. And family tension. You know, we often think of the holiday season as an opportunity and a time for families to gather. Well, the truth of the matter is, oftentimes there's stress in families. There's unforgiveness. There's tension in certain parts of our families. And what would seem to be a great time to anticipate families coming together. For some, there's a level of stress associated with it because of strained relationships, unreconciled differences, and this uncertainty about what the interaction may be like. These are just a few things, and I think there are enough for us to talk about tonight. And if I add any more to the list tonight, it'll stress us out, right? And then I have to tell us how to overcome it. So these are just some of the causes that are very, very common during the holiday season that individuals experience. So let's talk a little bit about some coping mechanisms, some practical and spiritual things that we might do. Philip is going to talk from a mental health perspective. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a spiritual leader. So for financial stress, one of the things I would encourage you to do is clarify your values. Sometimes we have this self-imposed stress about getting certain kinds and types of gifts that have a certain value that people will enjoy receiving. And sometimes I think it's a personal ego in it, right? But clarify your values and add meaning. Make sure you add meaning to whatever you're feeling this pressure to do financially. What's most important in life? And oftentimes, if we take a real deep dive and some real self-examination, we'll determine that oftentimes presence, P-R-E-S-E-N-C-E, is far more important than presence, P-R-E-S-E-N-T-S. If we really clarify our values and then prioritize accordingly. What's most important for the children? What's most important for our spouses, for our siblings, for parents or grandparents? What's most important as it relates to that Pollyanna gift or that secret Santa at work? Prioritize, don't impose obligations on yourself that you can't afford simply to fit in or maybe even to impress someone. Commit to good stewardship. We all want to be good stewards and managers of our resources. And so what's the best use of our resources and how can we be really, really good stewards without taking on a great deal of bills that we're going to have to pay or going into debt? A lot of people go into debt during the holiday season that they have to dig themselves out of the first of the year. And oftentimes it takes nearly a full year to get yourself out of it. And now you're back in the holiday season again. So commit to good stewardship. The second area I mentioned in terms of causes is loneliness. And so rather than barricading yourself in, those who are single and live alone, those who don't have a strong network of supportive relationships, seek community. We have to be active and proactive and availing ourselves to connect with community, whether that community is among coworkers or in your neighborhood, among neighbors or friends or family members. But don't isolate and don't hibernate, but seek community so that you can have good, positive company that will help you to avoid loneliness during the holidays. We also mentioned fatigue being a cause of stress. So make rest a part of your plans. So often we plan from, again, November right on through December, right on to the new year. And we come into the new year worn out and stressed out. Well, make rest a part of your plans. As you schedule your December, the end of November, look on the calendar and put, on your calendar some places where you can rest, where you can take time for yourself to reflect and to refuel. And then seek the rest that Christ offers. In Matthew 11:27, the scripture says, Christ says in the scripture, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke," he says, "upon you, and learn of me, for my yoke is easy, my burden is light." And so find that rest that you need in Christ. The other area, and I'm moving a little quickly because I want to make sure I manage my time well. I think I was given about 20 minutes, and so I don't want to go over. The other area we mentioned as a cause of grief is as a cause of stress, especially during the holiday season, is grief. And so I would encourage especially those who have lost loved ones this year and you're experiencing your first Thanksgiving, first Christmas, first New Year's without them. Prepare for the feelings and emotions associated with the grief and the loss. In other words, expect it so that you're not surprised by it. Those feelings of sorrow or heaviness. And when I use the word depression, I'm not using it in the clinical sense of that word, but just feeling down and downcast. Expect those feelings to come because it's quite natural, especially if that person, that loved one, was typically a major part of your holiday celebration. Another thing you can do is express your grieving thoughts with a friend or family member. Don't hold it in, but talk about what you're feeling, what you're thinking, the emotion that you're experiencing. And then you might plan a way to celebrate the life of the deceased. Include that in the holiday celebration. And we're going to remember grandmother when we come together. We're going to talk around the dinner table about some of her favorite sayings, the dish she would normally provide, or the jokes grandfather would normally tell. But plan a way to celebrate the life of the deceased and continue a tradition in their honor. Maybe it was some tradition that they implemented, something they always encouraged the family members to do. And you might continue that tradition in their honor as a way of not only celebrating their life and keeping their memory alive, but also as a way of coping with the grief associated with that loss. Family tension was one of the other causes of stress that I mentioned. And so I would encourage you to celebrate the blessing of family. Oftentimes when there's tension in the family, we can fail to realize how important, how important and how valuable family is. Plan to reconcile broken or strained relationships as a part of the holiday season, as a part of the holiday gatherings. Practice forgiveness, letting things go, intentionally and intentionally committing yourself to restoring the relationship and relieving your loved one of the burden of whatever offense may have taken place in that family. And then pray for peace. Pray for peace in the family, peace in relationships, peace among the loved ones. And then practice gratitude. So I'm a firm believer that gratitude changes our focus and our perspective. And I say it changes our focus because so often in life, we're focused on what we don't have. We're focused on what's lacking, what's missing. But when we're grateful, we place the focus on what we do have, the blessings, the things that God has provided. Many of the little things that's right before us that we take for granted and we look over. But when we're grateful, when we practice gratitude, it changes our focus and it gives us a new perspective, a different outlook on life, where we really begin to appreciate the little things in life that really can make a big difference. Then in the Christian life, there's a practice called spiritual formation. And they are simply spiritual disciplines that we incorporate in our everyday lives that help us develop our relationship with God and our relationship with others. And those disciplines are prayer, which is an ongoing conversation with God, worship, which is our way of celebrating God's goodness, of being engaged and enlightened by the ways and the wonders of God. I think worship is a way to breathe out. It's a way to exhale as we offer praises to God, as we sing, and as we fellowship with other believers. Meditation, getting somewhere quiet where you can just inhale and exhale and get away, pull apart from the busyness of life, all of the responsibilities, all of the noise that overwhelms us. And we, of course, we live in a society now. If I'm kind of over my time, just wave at me and I'll move it along quickly here. And so meditation, fellowshipping with other believers is so important. Enjoying those healthy and holy relationships, and scripture reading, of course, where we're inspired by, enlightened, and reminded of the word of the Lord. And so these are just some tools and tips that you might consider utilizing to reduce some of the stress that the holiday season may bring. So thank you for allowing me to share. I hope I didn't go over my time. If I did, I apologize.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your message and your insight, Reverend Houston. And now we're going to move into Philip's presentation because we're saving questions till the end. But please, guys, if you have any questions, put them in the chat so you don't forget them, and we'll be sure to circle back at the end. So without further ado, Philip, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for you, sir.
Thank you, Ali. I appreciate it. Thank you to the whole Building Blocks Coalition. I appreciate you having me. It's an honor to be here. I do always answer the call. It's people that's doing good work in the community. I really do appreciate it, and anything I can do to help, I always try to step in. So I do appreciate it. I do want a feedback survey though, at the end of it, because there's no way I should be following Pastor Houston. That is the most intimidating thing to do. So I'm gonna leave some feedback on that one, but other than that, I do appreciate it. I am glad though to see that his presentation kind of mimics some of the things that I'm going to be talking about as well, because it shows the parallel between spirituality and mental health and why that's so important. And you can't have God and a therapist at the same time, as I'm sure you've heard people say. And so I tell my people that I work with, the goal is balance, right? We want to balance our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health, and our spiritual health. That's when we're operating at our most optimal level, when we're able to do that. So very appreciative for Pastor Houston's presentation. And so same thing, right? I'm going to go into keeping with the theme of weathering the storm, melting away holiday stress. I'm going to do this in kind of 3 phases, right? So when you're thinking about weathering the storm, the first thing you want to do is prepare for the storm. So that's going to be the first part of this presentation. And so in preparation, and you can go ahead to the next slide if you like, Ms. Ali. In preparation, what we're going to do, just kind of talking about some foundational things, right? We're going to make sure that we are all on the same page about what we're talking about, and know what we're walking into. And so the definition of mental illness as defined by the American Psychiatric Association is that they are health conditions involving changes in emotion, thinking, or behavior, or a combination of these. Mental illnesses are associated with distress and or problems functioning in social, work, or family activities. So something that stands out, or the thing that stands out to me every time I see this definition, and I make sure that I always read this definition to people, is it identifies mental illness as a health condition. And so that is the thing that kind of adds to the stigma, right? People don't see mental illness as a health condition because you can't see it. You can't bandage it up. You can't, you can't take a pill or two, but it just presents differently, right? So if you have somebody in your family, or if you know somebody who has high blood pressure, diabetes, or sugar, depending on what side attracts you from, high cholesterol, right? What do you tell them to do? Tell them to go to a doctor, follow the doctor's orders so that they can get better. But if somebody tells you that they're depressed or anxious, right, a lot of times they're told, suck it up, man up, go take a nap, you'll be all right when you wake up. Life goes on, you'll be all right, it's not that bad. And so how do you expect one to get better if they don't have that same compassion that's given to others with physical health illnesses? So I always make sure that's the foundation of everything we're going to talk about and everything that I do. So a statistic by the National Alliance on Mental Illness states that 1 in 5 adults in the United States experience some form of mental illness each year. 1 in 5. So we have 38 people on this call right now. So that's just over 7. So at least 7 of us either have or will experience some type of mental illness within the next year. So that's a sobering number for me. 1 in 5 is a lot. And so something I want you guys to be aware of. Next, just kind of looking at what we're on the outskirts of, right, is the COVID-19 pandemic. So think about how COVID impacted your mental health, or your health overall, right? So it was reported, and I forget who, I didn't write that down. I forgot who reported that. The National Institute of Mental Health reported that psychological distress reports increased drastically since COVID-19. So, some could say that it's because, we were in quarantine and we were forced to be with our kids all day, couldn't send them to school, and, had to be with our significant others for 24 hours a day. I'm sure nobody on this call, of course, I'm talking about other people out there, right? Of course. But now some of the other things that kind of caused some of that drastic increase, just some of the uncertainty around the lockdown, right? This is something that hadn't happened in over 100 years. This pandemic of this proportion, right? So just that uncertainty is anxiety inducing in itself. The lack of connection to people. We are social creatures. And so to be kind of yanked away from what we knew as a regular life and, be confined to our homes and not be able to hug, shake hands or anything like that, that's impactful on our mental health. The numerous restrictions that were in place, right? So mask, to mask, not to mask, right? And all the other things that came along with that. Some job instability as well. That was another cause that came out. So the job instability, not for the people that quit their job so they can get that unemployment, that extra unemployment, right? Live their best life. But for those, that just kind of wasn't sure, day by day, what's going to be there for me as far as my job is concerned. So all of these things, even the lack of information or the inaccurate information that was given out, because all of a sudden our health became a partisan issue. And then I say all of these things, but I left out the most important one, is the fear of contracting the disease itself. We had all these other factors and hadn't even mentioned the fact that, people were contracting this disease, and for a long time, the prognosis wasn't good. And so all these things kind of added to it. And so the things that came out of it was increased experience of depression, anxiety, stress, panic disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, somatic symptoms, sleep disorders, delirium, self-mutilation, and suicide. All of that was a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. You can go to the next slide. So children, right? I was listening to I was looking at the news yesterday morning, mostly because I like to start my day with depressing news, clearly. But I was watching the news and they were talking about how there was a national state of emergency declared last year for youth, specifically for youth, due to the increase in mental health concerns. And so, just thinking about that, and in Virginia alone, they're saying now that 11% of children ages 3 to 17 have either anxiety or depression. Between the ages of 3 and 17, that's like 1 in 10, they have either anxiety or depression. So as adults, right, I'm assuming that everybody here is an adult. I can't see everybody. But as adults, just thinking about what you got to be depressed or anxious about between the ages of 3 and 17, right? But their way of viewing and seeing the world and experiencing the world is much different than ours, right? So now, they're taking, I look at, some of the homework that some of the kids that I work with, and even my son when he was in school ages, that he was taking, I couldn't do it. And he was doing stuff in middle school, I was doing in college. And so, you have that and those pressures. Now you have 7th and 8th graders, so it's about 13, 14-year-olds having to decide what they want to do with their life, right? Here in Norfolk specifically, I know that each school is a charter school. So for these kids, they have to decide, all right, I want to go into medical school at Maury, or the leadership program at Norview, or the IB program at Granby. At such a young age, they're forced to make a decision on what to do with their lives. And understanding, we know that they don't have to have it figured out. But for them, they feel like they do. That pressure is behind them to figure that out. And if they don't know, now they're inadequate, and there's a lot of pressure. And so many kids, young people are looking for therapists now and are seeking medication. Really, a lot of them are on medication to kind of help with that anxiety that they have, because that responsibility is too great. Then on top of that, looking at the suicide numbers, suicide is the #2 cause of death for young people between the ages of 10 and 14. And it's the #3 cause of death for young people ages 15 to 24. That's upsetting for me to see that. It just kind of touches me every time I think about it. I see that, and I work with young people. That's why I take what I do very, very seriously, right? Because we don't know. You don't know what other people are going through. So as we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about the storm. So when we talk about the storm, what are we talking about? We're talking about the holidays. So it was the National Alliance on Mental Illness did a survey, and they said that 3 in 5 adults state that the holidays make their mental health worse. So that's 60%. And then they also add that 64% of people who are already diagnosed with the mental illness report that their symptoms get worse during the holidays. So the holidays is doing something to people. Something's going on. So the question becomes, what is it about the holidays that make it so difficult for people? So as we go on to the next slide, one of the first things is grieving the loss of loved ones or relationships that we've had, right? Pastor Houston had already spoke of it. The holidays can be a reminder of the people that we lost. And it causes us to relive that grief yet again, because sometimes we don't deal with it the right way. Or let me rephrase that. Sometimes we don't deal with it, period. And so we just kind of stay busy and stay on the go, right? But what happens in the holidays is things slow down. You don't have the same work requirements, right? You have a couple of extra days off. The family's all coming together. Other things are happening that makes you have to really face that loss that you're holding on to and suppressing. And it doesn't always have to be somebody you lost. It could be a relationship, grieving a divorce or separation, right? Because now the family dynamic has changed. And so, family time has changed. The way it all looks has changed. And so now you're grieving what once was. The next thing is being around people who cause discomfort. So, and I'm not making light of this at all, but many families, some of you may know some of these families. I'm sure there's nobody here have that uncle, right? That people say, don't be in the room alone with Uncle Johnny. Make sure that at least 2 of y'all be in the room with him at all times, because under that umbrella of things that what happens in the house stays in the house. We don't talk about things that happen to them people, quote unquote, them people, right? Who would have thought I would have grew up to be them people? But being around people, the holidays force us to be around people and re-experience things and that we try to forget about because we have to share space with them. Next is financial stress. Also Pastor Houston touched on this, right? Every cost of everything is going up. And then, so if you're pressured to buy food for a holiday because you're hosting, or, with Christmas coming up, you're buying gifts and feeling like I have to do this because this is part of the holiday spirit. And I want people to know that I care about them. There's stress and that expectation of spending a lot of money, which may or may not be there. And then last, seems like it's out of order, right? It doesn't seem like it fits here, but lack of sunlight. So we talk about seasonal affective disorder. I don't know who's heard of this, but seasonal affective disorder is really just a type of depression that's related to the changes in the seasons. So as the days get shorter, there's less sunlight. And sunlight is vital to our mental and physical health, right? So vitamin D helps us with our emotional regulation, as well as our physical health. It helps to elevate our mood, regulates our circadian rhythm, which helps in the reproduction of melatonin so we can get rest. And also just kind of producing that serotonin that helps with our emotions and feelings and cognitions and all of that. So making sure that we get an adequate amount of sunlight is important. And so when we are feeling, or when we're experiencing the holidays, on the next slide, we'll talk about what to look for. What are some signs of holiday distress? Now, this could be within yourself or with your loved ones around you. And so, that feeling alone, feeling isolated, like, nobody else or nothing else matters or cares about me, and I'm on an island, much like this guy in this picture, right? Next is the isolation from others. Just making you stand in your room for, all the day because you don't want to be associating with anyone else. A decreased motivation to do things you would normally do. So that can be anything from, taking a shower to eating, right? So all of those things kind of are things to look out for. Also, increased sadness or sporadic crying spells. Sometimes we look at crying as a form of weakness, when in reality, all crying is just our body letting us know that, hey, I need, I need a little something more. I'm in distress, and it's releasing, endorphins and all these things to kind of help us relieve some of that emotional distress that we're experiencing. So, those crying spells are signs that, hey, you know what, I'm holding on to too much, and I need to let some of this go. And then last but not least, anxiety or excessive worry around just the thought of the holidays. So having that also is a sign that, you are becoming stressed out and distressed over the holidays. And so that was the second part. So the third part is weathering the storm. How do we weather the storm? And so one of my favorite Maya Angelou quotes is, every storm runs out of rain. That's something I constantly remind myself, right? At some point, this is going to be over and I'm going to be okay. Just reminding yourself that. So some of the things that you can do to weather the storm, give yourself grace. It's okay to feel what you feel. Don't feel bad because you're sad or you're angry. A lot of times, especially when we're grieving, right? We may have some anger towards that person. That's okay. Lean into it, sit in it. Allow yourself to work through it. Give yourself that same grace that you give other people, right? We are quick to forgive others for things that they may do, and tell them that, hey, it's okay. Don't be so hard on yourself. But we won't do that for ourselves. So give yourself that same grace that you would others. You are deserving. Find ways to commemorate the loved ones that we've lost. And so that could be anything from writing a poem, having everybody go around and say different words to or about that person, sharing stories, lighting a candle in their memory or even in their spot where they would normally sit, making their favorite dish or their favorite meal, or wearing something as a reminder. So that's something I do, right? So wearing is a problem. My grandfather, he would wear suspenders. That was his thing. He always had suspenders on, but he had suspenders and a belt. I never understood that. We used to joke him when I was younger. He would always wear suspenders and a belt. It made no sense to me. It still doesn't to this day. But on Christmas, that's what I always do. I wear suspenders and I wear a belt just in memory of him. So another thing that we can do to help weather the storm is set boundaries. We have to have realistic expectations based on who people really are and not who we want them to be, right? Another Maya Angelou quote, right? When people show you who they are, believe them, right? So, we have these expectations of people that have certain titles in our life, and we want them to fulfill that role in the way that we believe that they should. But sometimes everybody's not ready for that. So have those realistic expectations for those around you. Be mindful of how you let people in your life. Everybody doesn't need to be in the center with you. Some people you got to keep on the outskirts. Not everybody has your best interests at heart. And so just being mindful of that with your boundaries. You don't have to be anywhere longer than you want to be. So if you're not in the holiday spirit or you're in an uncomfortable situation and you say, hey, I just want to come over just to say hey to everybody and I'm going somewhere else to eat. They don't have to know that somewhere else is back to your house. It's all right, but if you don't feel comfortable, if you have to protect if you have to protect your peace, nobody else is going to do that for you. So it's okay to say, hey, just wanted to reach out to everybody, FaceTime them. Hey, how's everybody doing? Love y'all. I'll see y'all later. I'm not doing it today. I'm not feeling it today. That's okay. People get kind of anxious about setting boundaries, and it becomes difficult because they want other people to be pleased, right? That's usually why we have loose boundaries, because we're trying to please other people. And so everything that we do is about pleasing someone. But like I said, we have to be protective of our own peace. Another thing, create new traditions to help you get in the spirit, to help make things fun and to keep you into it, right? So some things you could do is do a recipe swap, maybe like an older generation swapping with the younger generation, right? And seeing who can make these things better. Creating family games, just saying, having games that everybody can play together and make it competitive and fun. We do taboo, and I'm very competitive. Well, most of us are very competitive. It gets ugly sometimes. Don't play spades. I tell you that spades can end family, so don't do spades. But traditions are a significant part of who we are. That's how we identify. That's how we identify who we are. That's who we identify with. That's how we identify with our culture. That's how we identify. If you think of the hierarchy of needs, right? That sense of belonging, we need that, and traditions are an important part of that. So find different ways to make things fun and exciting for the family. And then the last thing I'll say about weathering the storm is do the things that make you happy. Get outside, get some sun. Like we talked about how important it is to get the vitamin D. I tell all of my clients, get outside for 30 minutes a day. Direct sunlight. Don't sit in your car. Don't sit by the window. Go outside. Get that direct sunlight. If you know that you're getting more anxious about spending time with the family, journal before and after your day with the family, right? Because usually it's a lot worse than what we actually experience, right? Our anxiety makes us believe that things are going to be so insurmountable and overwhelming that we won't be able to handle it, right? So you can get some of those thoughts out, go spend time with the family, come back home, and your tone will usually change, right? It's like, yeah, they're a little annoying, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. So that's another thing to do. Take a walk, go for a run, go for a bike ride, before you go to spend time with the family, or after, depending on how early you get together, rather. Do something creative. So art, music, cooking is even, I consider that an art as well. So just doing something where you create something that has a finished product. That is a huge help for your mental health. And then lastly, keep on a schedule. As I said earlier, we have so much extra time usually during the holidays with things being a little bit more lax. And so create a schedule for yourself that includes you putting yourself first. Let me rephrase that. It doesn't include you. It prioritizes you putting yourself first, doing those things that are going to be helpful for your mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health. So making sure that you do those and keep them as part of your day. And that is my take on how you weather the storm. Hopefully it was helpful to somebody. Hopefully something in here could spark your interest and something that you can implement into your own life. And I appreciate the time that you all have given me.